Chapter 3. Why in the hell would you even be considering meeting Rory? Lucian snapped. Do you know how stupid you sound right now? You gonna leave a man who loves you and wants to spend the rest of his life with you to be somebody's jump-off. This man is married with a child and… Do you feel even a little hypocritical letting those words slip out of your mouth? Judith spat, as she hopped up from her sister's couch. You don't have a problem sleeping with married men to get what you want, so why are you jumping down my throat for doing the same? Because there are consequences to pay when you do shit like that, mad. You don't come out of it unscathed, and the damage it does to your self-worth and self-esteem isn't worth it. Trust me, you don't get away scot-free, Lucian cried, as she thought about losing Andre. You're better than this, Judith. And you deserve more than to be some dude's toy to discard when he's done playing with you. Rory's not the one. He wasn't before and he's not now. She pulled Judith back down on the couch and held her. Rory's been back in your life for what, 24 hours? And look what he's doing to you. I know this isn't who you really are. Mad, so don't let him turn you into something you hate, like he did before. Judith cried hysterically and all she could do was hold on to her sister. What's wrong with me, Lucian Bell? How come he couldn't love me? There's nothing wrong with you, Judith. Rory just isn't the one who's supposed to love you. That honor belongs to someone else, she smiled. Oh, please, Judith rolled her eyes, knowing her sister was referring to Sydney. She reached over to grab a Kleenex from the side table and noticed luggage and taped boxes on Lucian's sun deck. What's with all the suitcases and stuff? She pointed. Oh, I wanted to talk to you about that. Please don't get upset, but… You better not be about to say what I think you're about to say. Lucian looked to the floor. Lucian Bell, have you lost your mind? Look, Judith, he's our father and he's sick and needs somewhere to go. Then let him go be with the nasty bitches he left us for. Let them take care of his ass. I can't believe you're letting him do this to you again, Judith said, shaking her head in disgust. You need to take the advice you just gave me. That's not the same thing, Mad. Isn't it? No, it's not. Daddy loves us and he's been a good father. Well, I guess you would think that because he's always raving about you. Lucian's so smart and generous. Lucian makes the world a better place. Lucian's so special. He's always bragging on you, but all he ever says about me is that I'm pretty, like I ain't got shit else going for myself. But I bet that would change if I gave him money all the time and sang his praises like you do. Don't be like that, Mad. There are a lot of good things about Daddy. I mean, yes, he was a horrible husband, but that's between him and Mama. It doesn't have anything to do with us. Mama's poisoned you so much against him that you refuse to give him credit for the ways he did support us, and the times he was there for me and you. Look, Lucian Bell, you can romanticize your relationship with Edmund all you want, but I know who he is. He's the dude who gambled and drank his paychecks away and left Mama to hustle and find ways to feed and clothe us. You criticize her for all the uncles we had growing up instead of thanking her for doing whatever she had to do to make sure we always had what we needed when the lying, cheating, manipulative bastard she married didn't give a fuck and left her to struggle on her own. He's the same man who not even a month ago threatened not to walk you down the aisle if you didn't pay for his trifling asshole to fly to the wedding. As if you paying for his ticket, tux, and hotel wasn't enough. And where has he been, Lucian? Did he call once to see how you were after being devastated by the man you loved? Did he come by to check on you, cook for you, hug you, or any damn thing? No, of course he didn't, because he was too busy flying to Texas, sleeping his ass in the luxurious hotel you provided for him, and trying to cash in on your misery. And now that he's even more fucked up with multiple sclerosis, he comes knocking on Mama's door talking about how much he loves us and wants to be a family again. Judith snorted, still unable to believe the audacity of Edmund Lawson. Fuck him. I'm glad Mama told his ass to go to hell and slammed the door in his face. But you went and fell for his bullshit once again, like you don't know he's gonna break your heart. That's what he always does, Lucian. But don't let him do it this time. Tell him to go live with the tramp he was willing to miss your wedding for. Let her pay for his healthcare and take him to the doctor and feed and clean him when he can no longer do it himself. He's our father, Judith. He needs us and we should be there for him. Be the bigger person, Lucian encouraged. I think if you open up your heart to Daddy, it will help you love Sydney as much as he loves you. Oh, give me a damn break. One thing doesn't have to do with the other. I think it does. I believe the reason you can't love Sid is… I can't love Sydney because he doesn't really love me. What? Of course he does, Judith. He wants you more than anything. No, he wants me because he can of me. It's all about the hunt, Lucian. I'm a challenge to Sydney and he likes to rise to it just to see if he can finally win. But I bet if I actually married him it wouldn't be long before he grew tired of me and moved on to the next challenge. You can't really believe that, do you? After everything you've been through with Sid. I don't know. Look, whatever, Lucian. You don't know Sydney like I do. Yes, he's a good man, but he's not perfect the way everybody makes him out to be. His moody ass can get real dark sometimes, to the point where I wonder if he's gonna drive off a cliff one day. Oh, give him a break, Mad. Sydney has an extremely high-pressured job that would drive anybody a little crazy. People are basically putting their lives in his hands when they hire him to take on their cases. A lawyer with a conscience is a hard thing to come by these days. Besides, there are so many other things he could be doing to relieve stress than expressing his feelings. Sid doesn't drink or smoke or do any of the things you might expect someone with his stress level to do. Yeah, he fucks women to relieve his stress. But whatever, Lucian, this isn't about him. this is about you not letting Edmund take advantage of you again. You don't owe him anything, and I don't think you should turn your life upside down for a man who didn't and wouldn't do the same. Can we just agree to disagree? I don't want to fight with you, Matt. I love you and I want you to be okay. So please promise me you won't get involved with Rory. Well, like you said, let's agree to disagree. In the 2 weeks that followed, Lucian moved Edmund into her home and even hired a nurse to care for him during the day and overnight whenever she had to travel for business. Judith threw herself into work and traveled at least 3 times a week. She tried to escape her problems, but both Rory and Sydney sent text messages and emails begging to see her. Judith ignored them at first, but eventually she gave in and responded. It was something she would come to regret. After a week of having his calls ignored, Sydney left a final message informing Judith that if she didn't contact him by the end of the day, he never wanted to hear from her again. Refusing to respond to threats, she ignored that message as well. Soon after, she dialed Rory's cell phone. 3 nights in a row, Judith carried on extremely inappropriate phone conversations with him, and by the 4th night they agreed to meet. She reserved a hotel suite and spent a lot of time and money making it romantic. She wanted their night together to be something Rory would never forget, so she bought sexy lingerie, ordered steak and lobster for their meal, and had special treats strewn around the room for them to enjoy. Sadly or thankfully, Judith wasn't sure which, Rory never showed. All of her calls to his cell phone went directly to voicemail, and when she checked her emails, there was no message explaining his absence. Humiliated but determined to rid herself of Rory Michaels once and for all, Judith deleted his email address and phone number. Then she logged on to Facebook to unfriend him and learned why she'd been stood up. "We're pregnant." Read the caption under Rory's newest photo album. While Judith sat alone in her hotel suite waiting for her lover's arrival, Rory and Alyssa celebrated their growing family with loved ones and friends. And as much as Judith wanted to scream and cry and blame the world, she knew the only person at fault was her. "It was so not worth it, Lucian Bell," Judith said aloud as she packed her things to leave. The last place she wanted to be was in that suite. It reeked of desperation and stupidity. "Did you not understand my message?" Sydney glared as he stood in the doorway blocking entry into his luxurious 3-bedroom, 2-bath home. Despite the drizzle and the fact that Judith looked cold in her trench coat and 4-inch heels, he refused to let her inside. "I'm not doing this with you again, Sid," Judith purred as she moved towards him. "Don't Sid me." "Stop, Judith, I'm not playing with you," he said when she ran her hand down his muscular chest, slowly batting her long eyelashes at him. "That shit ain't gonna work this time. Besides, I've got company coming, so you need to go." "Bye," he said, taking a step back. "So you don't want me?" she whispered, completely unconcerned with whoever was coming to visit him. Judith planted a kiss on his neck, then untied the belt of her trench coat, revealing a red sheer bra and red sweetheart panties with diamond accents. Sydney tried hard not to look, but he couldn't help himself. Judith's body was amazing, and the diamond-studded navel ring she wore turned him on. However, he couldn't keep letting her treat him the way she did. It was time to put an end to whatever it was they had, once and for all. "Are you sure you don't want me?" "Because I want you so bad," she smiled devilishly before planting a soft kiss on his lips. "It's Maddie, baby. Nobody can do it like I can," Judith whispered, gently stroking his genitals as she kissed his neck. "Let me in, Sid. Let me love you like only I can." She was about to kiss him again, but he stopped her. "Do you love me?" Sydney whispered, staring deep into her eyes. "Yes," she panted. "Yes." That time he let her kiss him as they made their way to his bedroom and out of sight of any of his neighbors who may have been watching. Sydney and Judith knocked over lamps and chairs along the way as they tore at each other's clothes. Their lovemaking was sensual, intense, and completely uninhibited. Nothing could stop them when they were in the throes of passion, not even Joanna's incessant knocking and ringing of the doorbell. After traveling 4 days that week for work, Judith wanted to spend Saturday alone at home relaxing. The sound of Lucian unlocking her front door made it obvious that wouldn't be happening. Judith loved her sister dearly, but it aggravated her that Lucian always dropped over unannounced and didn't even bother to knock first. The key she was given was meant for emergencies, but Lucian didn't seem to get it no matter how many times Judith complained. "Hey, girl, what you doing?" Lucian asked, as she plopped on the king-sized bed beside her sister. She kissed her cheek, then started rummaging through the mail Judith planned to go through herself. "Ooh, what's this?" "It's my Dot magazine." "You're what?" she asked, flipping through the pages. Judith snatched it out of her hand. "It's Dot magazine, the one I told you about. Remember, I told you my girl Dorothy Enriquez started her own magazine, and I asked you to go to her website to order a copy, which you obviously didn't do since you sitting here acting clueless. But it's not too late. Go to my computer, look up www.dotmagazineonline.com and order your own." Lucian rolled her eyes, then got up and did as she was told. She was all for supporting women who worked hard to make their dreams a reality. Plus, she had to talk to Judith and needed her in the best mood possible. "Okay, I ordered it," Lucian stated after entering her credit card information. "Now can I talk to you about something?" "Yeah, what's up? You know I love you, right?" "Oh, Lord, what do you want, Lucian Bell?" "Well, something's been on my heart and I need to say it to you. It bothers me that you believe Sydney thinks of you as a challenge and that he'd abandon you if you ever really gave him your heart. I fear you're gonna end up just like Mama. She had a wonderful man who sincerely loved and cared for her, but she couldn't let go of the past, and it cost her future with an amazing man. And now she's spewing out all this venom about how Mr. James did her wrong. But I don't blame him for leaving her and finding someone who could accept and reciprocate his love. I'm glad he's happy. And even though you and Mama think I'm wrong, I am going to his wedding and I'm gonna celebrate the love he and Miss Charlotte have. I just hope I don't have to do the same with Sydney. Life is short, Judith, and even a man who loves you to death will eventually get tired of being unloved and move on. So don't end up like Mama. Stop being so scared of getting hurt that you won't open your heart and receive what could be the greatest love of your life. And you're sure that's Sydney? You know I love him and I think y'all could really be happy together. But that's not for me to decide. I'm just saying if Sydney's who you want, then give the relationship a real chance. On the other hand, if he's not who you see forever with, then that's okay too. Just make a decision one way or the other, Mad. Sydney is a good man who genuinely loves you and he doesn't deserve the way you treat him. Give him 100% or let him go so he can be happy with someone who will love him the way he deserves. Stop using him to make you feel better about yourself. That's wrong, Mad, and you'll pay for that. Judith didn't like hearing what Lucian said, but she knew her sister was right. She had to make a decision about Sydney one way or another. On Friday, March 18th, Judith drove to the Oakland Hills to confront Sydney. Every time she rode through his neighborhood, her mood changed and she became almost childlike and dreamy. The tree-lined streets and big, beautiful homes made her think of family. Judith imagined moms and dads around the dinner table with their children talking about the events of the day. A smile spread across her face when she actually saw a father nervously running behind his son riding his bike without training wheels for the first time. Suddenly, a sense of panic fell over Judith. She was nervous and terrified that she was about to make the biggest mistake of her life. She sat in the driveway staring at Sydney's house. It was a beautiful, brown brick, two-story home that looked perfect for a family. The big front yard, manicured hedges, and bright-colored roses only added to its appeal. Out of the blue, Judith recalled the time she helped Sydney pass out candy to costume-clad kids on Halloween. She stood in the doorway with her arm wrapped around him, waving at the neighbors and playing the role of a happy wife. That was 3 years ago, the first time Sydney asked her to move in with him. They made wild, passionate love that night, but Judith left while he slept. 2 months went by before he heard from her again, one of many times that she heard him. Judith walked up the winding sidewalk and Sydney opened the door before she got to the porch. "Hi," she said, nervously shifting her weight from one leg to the other. She suddenly felt self-conscious in the mustard-colored, silk chiffon dress and 4-inch heels she wore. "Why the hell did I put this on? Hey, what's going on?" Sydney frowned as he stared at her, confused. Yes, what? "Yes, I'm ready to move in and build a life with you," she said, placing her suitcases down beside her. Judith had never felt more nervous than she did at that moment. "Sydney," she called, unable to read his expression. He walked down the 3 steps leading up to his front door and stood in front of her. A smile spread across his lips before he kissed Judith with passion and excitement. They held hands as each grabbed a suitcase and walked inside the house. Judith could only hope she was home and that come Halloween she'd actually be a wife and not just playing a role. "I love you so much," Sydney whispered, after they made love. "I can make you happy, Maddie. I promise." He held her in his arms throughout the night, not ever wanting to let go. His father and brother were livid when Sydney called to inform them that he was taking a 2-week vacation starting immediately. He didn't care, though. All that mattered was being with Judith. The two of them took off for a romantic, fun-filled week in Jamaica and they laughed, drank, and made love like it was the last days of their lives. Sydney and Judith spent the following week holed up in his home, oblivious to the rest of the world. When they weren't tearing the house apart making love, they were talking into the wee hours of the night. Judith learned a lot about Sydney and his hopes and dreams for the future. He talked a lot about having children and she knew in her heart he'd make a wonderful father. "So?" he asked, sitting in the middle of his bed. "I'm sorry, what?" Judith asked, snapping back to attention. "How many babies are we having?" Sydney smiled as he fed her another chocolate-covered strawberry. "I think 3 would be cool. Sydney Jr., Sydney the Third, and Sydney Yvette." "You must be crazy," Judith laughed. "If I ever had babies they would have their own names. I don't like all that junior stuff. And I surely wouldn't name a girl Yvette. I still wish Mama hadn't given me that for a middle name." "I think it's beautiful," Sydney said, kissing chocolate from her lips. "And what do you mean if you ever had babies? Don't you want kids?" "I don't know. I don't know if I'm the right type of person to be a mom. I would hate to screw up my kids. I mean, what kind of example would I be?" "Stop it, Judith. I hate when you say stuff like that," Sydney snapped. "Why do you love me, Sid? Why do you put up with me?" "I put up with you because you're everything I've ever wanted in a woman. I see all the things you try to hide, like how big your heart is. You love deep and hard. But you've been hurt so you throw up all these walls to keep people from seeing how tender and sensitive you really are. You intentionally do stuff to make others think one way of you when you're totally the opposite. And you choose things like your job, your anger, and this persona you've built for yourself to hide behind. But I see through it, Mad. I see you," he said, kissing her gently. "It's the little things that you do that stand out the most. Like how you'll send a card and a basket full of my favorite things just to brighten my day. Or how you go out of your way to cheer me up on my mother's birthday knowing how much I still miss her. Someone who's mean and cold like you pretend to be wouldn't even think to do stuff like that. Sydney smiled sweetly. I love you, Maddie, and I believe we could be happy together if you'd just trust me with your heart. They made love again, slow and tender. The next day, which was the last day of their vacation together, Sydney served Judith breakfast in bed and told her he had a surprise. Before he told her what it was, however, he needed to have his mind put at ease. The two of them had a wonderful time together and he didn't want it to end. Yet, there seemed to be something missing. Even when Sydney and Judith were as close as two people could be, he never felt like he had 100% of her. And he wasn't sure if all of her was something he'd gain over time or if she would never allow him to have it. Judith, do you love me? Sydney asked. Yes. Then how come you never say it? I just did. No, you always say yes when I ask you, but I've never heard you say Sydney I love you, he stated. Can you say it? Yes. They were both silent for a few moments. Boom, this would be a perfect opportunity, Sydney prodded. I love you, Sydney, Judith giggled. Ooh, girl, why you always gotta be difficult. You got a broth over here sweating. He smiled then planted a kiss on her neck. Well, here's your surprise, Sydney said, removing a pair of tickets from an envelope. It's that new play you were talking about. Tonight is the last performance and I thought we could grab a nice dinner and check it out. Since we have to return to the real world tomorrow, I thought we could end our vacation with a bang. Literally, he smiled, devilishly. He went to his closet and removed a stunning black dress and 4-inch heels for her to wear. It complemented the black, tailored suit he purchased for the occasion. Later that evening, after a delicious meal, Sydney escorted Judith to their seats at the Paramount Theater in Oakland. The play began and it didn't take long for Judith to realize it wasn't as great as she thought it would be. I'll be right back, Judith whispered to Sydney, then excused herself to the ladies' room. She stared at her reflection for a long while and had the overwhelming need to cry. Judith knew she should have been happy, but she wasn't and couldn't figure out why. All at once it hit her like a ton of bricks. She loved Sydney dearly, but she wasn't in love with him. That's what was missing during their 2-week escapade. It's what prevented Judith from wanting to marry and have babies with him. Tears streamed down her face as she continued to stare at her reflection. The last thing Judith wanted to do was hurt Sydney, but she knew that's exactly what would happen. She had to let him go completely, and it broke her heart to know what they shared for years was over. Judith's tears came harder and faster as she wrapped her arms around herself and sobbed. 10 minutes later, after she finally stopped crying, Judith exited the ladies' room knowing she needed to tell Sydney the truth. Oh, excuse me, she said to the man she bumped into. I'm sorry. I'm not, he said, with a voice like Barry White. I love having beautiful women run me down. They both laughed. Ezra Prescott, he stated, extending his huge hand to her. Judith Yvette Lawson, she said, wondering what on earth possessed her to say her middle name. She opened her mouth to correct herself and said exactly the same thing. What the hell is wrong with me? You realize this is a Bluetooth, not a hearing aid, right? I heard you the first time, Ezra laughed, as he pointed to the phone attachment on his ear. He recognized that Judith was nervous and found it adorable. He thought she was beautiful, like a real-life baby doll. She blushed, hesitant to say anything else at the risk of making a fool out of herself. Judith wasn't sure what was happening, but she felt a magnetic pull to this stranger who probably should have frightened her. Ezra towered over her at 6'7" and nearly 300 pounds. Though, he wasn't fat. It was all solid muscle, and Judith found herself turned on by him. He had a full beard that made him look a little wild despite it being perfectly trimmed and groomed. Cute definitely wasn't a word Judith would use to describe him. And if she had only seen Ezra and not been able to talk to him, she probably would have thought he was mean and intimidating. His sense of humor and warm smile, however, made her feel comfortable, and she was drawn to him. Most inviting was his soft, hazel, brown eyes. There was tenderness in them, a vulnerability that made Judith feel like she could trust him with anything. It was the strangest feeling, but she didn't want it to stop. So, does the fact that you're out here stalling for time mean you're not enjoying the play? It's okay. Would it change your opinion at all if you knew this was one of my productions? Ezra asked, with a devious little grin on his face. You didn't let me finish. What I meant was it's okay for me to say this is the best play I've ever seen. They both laughed. So is this really your play? I'm just an investor. It's my boy's artistic expression, and I promised I would support him. Don't tell him, but I've never seen it all the way through. It'll be our secret, Judith smiled. After 15 minutes, Sydney got the sinking feeling Judith wouldn't return. And he didn't understand it. No matter how hard he tried to love her over their 2 weeks together, something was always missing. Tears threatened to fall from Sydney's eyes as he wondered why the woman he loved most in the world couldn't love him back. What else could he have done? Then Sydney removed the ring box from his pocket and popped the lid open. He stared at the engagement ring, trying desperately to figure out what his next move should be when his phone beeped. Sydney read the text message and snapped the box shut. He wanted to hurl it across the theater. I'm sorry, Sid. Goodbye, it read. Judith felt like a world-class jerk for sending Sydney a text message, especially after all the horrible things she said about Andre for doing the same to her sister. Sydney deserved so much more than that. She just couldn't bear to face him. She couldn't stand to see the hurt in his eyes knowing she was responsible. Judith honestly wished she was in love with Sydney. He was an incredible man who would make some woman a wonderful husband. Sadly, it took the 2 weeks they spent together for Judith to know with certainty she wasn't that woman. So are you sure you don't want to go talk to your friends? I can wait, Ezra offered, after Judith finished sending a text message. Oh, no, it's okay. I'll talk to them later, she said, allowing him to escort her out of the theater. Judith quickly wiped the tears that fell from her eyes, hoping Sydney would find the woman he deserved, and thereby be able to forgive her for breaking his heart. So where would you like to go, baby doll? Ezra asked, opening the passenger door of his silver 2012 Rolls-Royce Phantom. I'm your chauffeur for the night. Just name the place and I'll see that you get there safe and sound. Ezra was surprised when she asked to go to the 24-hour diner up the street as he pulled out of the VIP parking lot. Oh, look at this poor fella. He looks like he lost his best friend, his puppy, and his job. Judith's breath caught in her throat when she realized Ezra was talking about Sydney. He walked towards the VIP parking lot looking devastated and lost. A part of her wanted to hop out of the car and run into his arms. However, she knew doing so would only prolong the inevitable. Instead, Judith slid closer to Ezra. Not that Sydney would be looking for her in a phantom, but she couldn't bear the thought of hurting him more by seeing her with someone else. Judith silently pfioned for the stoplight to turn green so she could get as far away from her heartache as possible. And for a moment she thought it might be best to go home, eat a pint of ice cream, and mourn the loss of her involvement with Sydney. Yet, Judith couldn't explain the feelings she had for Ezra and didn't want to blow the opportunity to find out why she was able to feel for him upon meeting what she had never felt for Sydney in a lifetime. Judith never believed in love at first sight until she ran into Ezra. Now April 2, 2011 would forever be etched into her heart as the day she met her husband.